Hi, my name is Nikolai Beriski. I'm here for work experience and I'm joined with Heather Darnell.
Oh, good question. Yeah, it's a tough one. I think we'll say Darnell. Let's say Heather Darnell.
Darnell. And I'm going to be interviewing her, asking her questions, asking about her experience. And so tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, let's see. I was born and brought up in America, mainly in Boston on the East Coast. And then I went to university in Canada, in Montreal. And about 25 years ago, I moved to the United Kingdom. So I'm now 50 years old, and I am a dual citizen of America and the United Kingdom.
Nice. So what is your job and what do you like about it?
Oh, well, my job is a finance director. Yeah, so that's what my job is. I'm a finance director for businesses here in London, a small handful of them. And what I love about it is being able to work with a business owner and help them work out what their dreams and financial goals are. And then over the years, helping them get there.
Yeah.
And even more celebrating with them at the end when they've kind of, got where they want to go to. So I really like that about my job. And I'd say the other thing I really like about my job, which is the finance and accounting in general, is I love showing someone that their own financial figures are really interesting and beautiful and useful and not scary.
Do you feel like, in a way, you're supporting them by saying, hey, look, you've got tax, VAT, all of this, so maybe don't go over budget, don't do this, don't do that. So would you say that's like, that adds to the trust you have with your clients?
Yeah, that's definitely a part of what we do is being able to warn them about things or remind them about things so that they hopefully stay in a better position. And I do think there's a lot of trust between a client and their accountant or their finance director. Usually the kind of, showing someone your bank statement is like, showing someone behind the door, it's, you do have to be trusted to be in there.
Yeah. Is there an effective way of starting a business or is there not?
Yes, there's some more effective than others, but almost every situation is unique. So take, for example, if you were going to start a business and your business was going to be selling some kind of product, one of the scariest ways of starting it is to have to buy all the stock yourself, and you usually have a very big minimum order quantity, so you need to outlay a huge amount of money before you can even sell it. So a great effective way of starting a business, say, that's got products, is to see if you can pre-sell anything, if you can get someone to commit to buying before you make it. And actually Indiegogo and things like that are great vehicles for doing that. You tell people about your idea and they give you money in advance of you even making it.
Yeah, because if you start the business right, you're spending a lot more than you are receiving. So I understand that it's very important that you try not spend as much, because if the demand isn't high or it's not going well.
Yeah, then you're left with tons of stock, exactly.
Yeah. Taking the risk is, you either lose or you win.
Exactly.
It's a gamble, really.
Yeah. Whereas if you're going to start like a services business, you don't need to risk so much. So say you're going to sell your services as a copywriter or a designer or an accountant. You don't need to outlay a huge amount of money before doing it. What you're doing instead is you're more risking your time and effort, not necessarily money.
So what I've learned is buying product, it's more expensive and it's not the best way for a business to start.
It can be.
In my opinion.
It can be. Well, we haven't talked about the even scarier one, is if you want to go into manufacturing. So forget buying and selling products. If you want to make them, you need machinery,
materials.
Yeah. That's a really heavy outlay.
Would family businesses be more beneficial, or would they end up in problems?
Oh, great question. So let's take first, say, a husband and wife business. Do you know what % of marriages end in divorce in the UK?
No.
33%. So a third of all marriages end in divorce. Now, you never know when you start which one of those are going to end up in divorce, but imagine you now put a husband and wife in a business together. Well, there's already a third chance you're not going to stay together as a couple. But there's not a reason to not do it. I'm just saying there are risks in it. Ditto, if you have like parents and children, a lot of the time the parents want their children to do the business, but the kids don't want to do it. They say, I want to do something else. So it can be lovely. It can be really, really good to have family members working with you. You know, one of the most important things is you have immediate trust with a family member the way you don't have with an employee. With an employee, you've got to spend time, not necessarily for them to earn your trust, but for you to learn to trust them. And you kind of don't have to go through that with a family member. But yeah, I've seen it work and I've seen it not work. It works brilliantly for me. I love it.
Do you think that it depends on the family member? So let's say if I were to have a brother and we both started a business, would you think it would be different if I were to start with like a wife or something? Would it be different or? That's
a great question, and yeah, it really is. Because normally when you're husband and wife, you tend to have a plan for your family unit, right? You both want to get to the same goals. Whereas if you've got two brothers, you might have very different goals. One might just want a very steady income, and the other one might be like, no, let's risk everything. We could be millionaires. So because you might have two very different end goals, I think it's probably harder that way.
Why is it important to understand your business's finance?
Good question. So imagine you didn't understand anything about your company's finances and all you knew was how much money you had in the bank. I know every business owner knows how much money they have in the bank. And you didn't understand anything else and you were trying to decide, I've got to order my next batch of products, whatever it is, and I can either order 100 or I can order 1,000. I only need 100 now, but I'll get a way cheaper price if I order 1,000. I've got enough money in the bank to order 1,000. I'll do it. Well, if you don't understand your finances and you had just asked your accountant would say, you've got a VAT bill coming up in 3 weeks' time and you've got to save £20,000 for it. Or you've got your corporation tax bill coming up, you're risking that money now. Are you confident that you'll be able to make it up in enough time to pay your corporation tax bill? So that's a silly example, but if you only make the decision without understanding the whole financial picture of your business, you can be making incredibly bad decisions, even though they're right with what little information you have. So cash flow is probably the most important one. That was an example I gave you of cash flow. But another great example is if you think to yourself, of whatever I sell, I get to keep about 50% of it as profit and 50% I've got to spend buying it, whatever it is. But you don't realize, you haven't looked into your numbers well enough to know that actually it only costs you 40%, but 10% you're losing to wastage or stealing or something like that. If you haven't delved into those numbers and truly understood them, you could be making the wrong decision about expansion, for instance. So you really want to understand your numbers. Now, it doesn't mean you've got to understand, your office supply budget line item to the nth degree. Some numbers are more important than others. But in general, if you make decisions without understanding the whole financial picture of your business, you can be making the wrong mistakes for your business.
Would reselling products to a previous customer help us start in business?
Again, good question. When you're starting business, it's usually the hardest to get your first couple of clients. It's really hard to convince that first person to buy your new product or try your service or whatever it is. So as you're growing, and actually this is true for most of the life cycle of your business, it's easier to sell to your existing clients or people that have bought from you before than it is to go get a brand new one. You hear a lot about people in marketing, they talk about retaining a customer is cheaper than finding a new one.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely the case. You're better off selling to someone who's already bought from you before. The only thing to be wary of is if you only sell to an incredibly small number of people, your company's really vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know,
'Cause
what
if they lose interest, you've got no customers.
Then it's all gone and you haven't spent any time and attention getting new people. So it's always good to have a balance, but I would say it's definitely easier to sell to people that have bought from you before.
Yeah, because they already know what your product's like, right? They know what it is. They trust you because they've already bought from you.
Yep.
And they're most likely to buy again. So
yeah, you want to convince them to tell other people about how good your product is.
What is the purpose of that? Why do we need it?
Oh, great question. So without trying to answer for every government around the world, in general, what VAT is it's a tax on how much money you spend.
All right, back to it. VAT.
So VAT is a tax on how much you spend, not on how much you earn. We talked earlier about how most of the tax the UK government collects is on employment. It's income tax and it's national insurance. And that's great because it taxes you on your income and what you earn. But the purpose behind VAT is to say, okay, instead of, we want to be able to tax people more when they buy more. So if you've got someone with a lot of money and they're buying a lot of things or very expensive things, you can collect more VAT from them. Whereas say you've got a lower income family that doesn't spend as much, they're not taxed as much. So it's a tax on consumption. VAT is only ever paid ultimately by consumers, you and I. So it's not really a business tax, it's about end consumer tax. The government has companies collect it for them, which is nice of them. They don't collect it directly. And it's just incorporated in the price of everything you buy. So you might not know how much VAT is in the phone you bought or this pen you bought, but included within that is the VAT, and the company that sold it to you hands it over to the government.
Let's say I were to buy maybe monitors, computers for my business.
Yep.
How would the VAT be?
Yep, I understand. So if you yourself are a business and you've registered for VAT yourself, which you absolutely have to do as soon as you have at least £80,000 of sales in any 12-month period. It's actually £85,000 now. You have to register for VAT by law. Right. So imagine you're a business and you have registered for VAT. When you buy a computer or a monitor and you pay VAT to Currys or PC World, wherever you've bought it from, you can get that back from the government. So at the end of every quarter, when you have to report to HMRC, you report how many sales you've made and the VAT that you put on those sales, and you subtract from it all the VAT you had to pay out to your suppliers. And it's just the difference between those two numbers you pay. So the only time people can't reclaim the VAT is when they're an individual, because they're not VAT registered, or if you're a very small business and you haven't registered for VAT, then you can't claim it back.
Does being in good shape determine whether or not someone is more trustworthy in business?
Absolutely not. In the same way you should never judge a book by its cover, you should never judge any person by what they look like. It has no relation to either how trustworthy they are or how good they are in business or how nice they are or anything. It really, if someone's physically fit, it doesn't translate directly into any other trait whatsoever.
It could be argued though.
How so?
I mean, it shows how you present yourself to others.
Yeah, but physical fitness is not something that everyone thinks is a virtue. You know, to someone else who thinks physical fitness is important, then you are saying, you know, I'm like you in this way, so we have at least something in common. But not everyone thinks physical fitness is something to aspire to.
Okay.
You know, some people might think it's more about beauty.
Yeah.
And if you're beautiful, does it make you more trustworthy? No, not at all. So no, I don't think you can take any physical attribute and translate it into something like trustworthiness or being good at business or smarts or niceness.
What made you become an accountant?
I have no idea. I never wanted to be an accountant. When I left university and took a temporary job, I worked as a secretary, and I worked as a secretary in a finance department of a business. And I saw some people playing with Excel. Actually, it was Lotus 123 back then, but playing with Lotus 123 in Excel. And I thought, well, what are they doing over there? And as I started to find out more about what they did, I decided I really wanted to be able to do what they did. And I think a lot of it was I liked logic puzzles. I always liked stuff like that. And figuring out how to write formulas in Excel and how to build things in Excel is like solving a bunch of logic puzzles. And it just so happened that what they were working on was financial modeling. If it had been marketing modeling, maybe I would have done something else, but it was all financial. And so I just started doing more and more work of that type, and kept asking my boss, can I become a financial analyst? I really like what they do, and training up and doing it. And I ended up with a lot of experience in finance and analysis, but none in accounting at all. And it wasn't until I started my own business in 2003, when I wanted to try and help small businesses with finance stuff, that I realized I couldn't help them with finances if they didn't have up-to-date bookkeeping numbers. So I think within 3 or 4 years of starting up my business, I ended up hiring bookkeepers and accountants because that's what so much of the work was. And it wasn't until I'd been doing this business for 15 years that I finally went and I took my accountancy exams and was able to become a proper qualified accountant. So yeah.
What is the hardest and best thing that you've learned?
Oh. Well, back to that last question, one of the best things I ever learned was being a qualified accountant. I really wish I'd done it earlier in retrospect, but it was great. It opened up so many more opportunities for me. It meant I didn't have to rely on other people. I was able to do a lot more once I finally got that qualification. So that's probably the best thing I've learned. But it wasn't the hardest. The hardest thing I learned was how to play piano.
How would that be the hardest?
Because I'm so bad at it. It so doesn't come naturally. Learning accounting came a lot more naturally to me than learning piano. That's why it's hard.
What made you want to start your own business?
Ooh, so I worked for the same company for 10 years. I started out working for them in America, and I worked for them in the United Kingdom for 5 years. And when that company got bought out by a big bank, we all got made redundant. And I had come to learn in my 10 years at that company that I had moved all around, I'd done all kinds of roles there, and I'd gotten up just about as high as you can get. And when they offered me the top job, I said, ooh, I don't want it. I don't love what we do enough to do all the hard work that's required to own something.
You don't want to pursue it because you don't enjoy it.
Exactly. So when I got made redundant, I said, gosh, do I want to go work for another company where I'll eventually the same thing will happen again. I'll, rise and eventually, do I want it? No. And I said, the only thing you're ever going to be happy with is something you do yourself. But I don't think I would have tried it unless I'd had an example. My mother started her own business. She ran her own business. And I think because of that, I knew it could be done. And I think that's probably what spurred me on to do it.
Was there something on the way that motivated you into doing it, or was it just you thought, okay, I'm gonna start my own business, or did something?
Well, the real trigger was having my company bought out and being made redundant. So that gave me the choice. Quite often you just go through life without making the choice, and then something big happens that you suddenly say, I have now the opportunity to try something new or to go do what I've always done. So that was the trigger, and I don't think I would have done it except my husband was in a very stable job at the time. Oh, yeah. I don't think I would have risked the entire family household income on it. But because Ian had a very stable job at the time, I felt willing to risk my time and effort on starting something.
So how did you rise from the top? What's your success story?
My success story? Yeah. Oh, I thought you were asking about our client success story.
Okay, both. We'll do
I'll give you a client success story. For success in our, actually no, it's both. Success for me is making our clients successful, actually. I feel as though I've done a great job if the client has done a great job. And although we've had a couple of clients that have done so well, they've gone on to be bought by other companies. And we've had some companies, lots of companies that have grown over the time we've been with them, which is its own success. My favorite are probably had about 7 or 8 clients that have been able to grow their business to such a size, and then they've decided they wanted to do something completely different. So we've been able to structure things with them so that they could wind down that business, take out the money in the most tax efficient way possible, and allow them to try whatever their next dream is. So we've done that a lot, and those are really my favorite success stories.
Oh, so your favorite is when they stop doing what they're doing, then they change to something else.
Yeah. And I think probably because, it means you've got more than one great idea in you. You've had one great idea, you built a great business, you've made a lot of money, and now, I want to try something new. People like that are super interesting. They're super entrepreneurial. They always have something they want to do, and they don't just do the same thing for their whole life. So it's really fun being able to enable them to do that.
Yeah, switch from something else, because doing the same thing gets repetitive. So learning new stuff and then doing that and then getting better at it will help a lot.
Yeah.
What is the best way of starting from scratch? Is there any best way, or is there just only the basic standard?
The best way to start from scratch. So I guess the very first step is you have to have an idea of what you want, right? And how you come up with the ideas, I have no idea. It's so unique to the person, and it's about creativity. And then after that, I think, again, I'm naturally a cautious person. I'm not a super risky person. So I would always say the best way to start is to, make sure you found what your minimum viable product is. Don't worry about making it perfect. Make sure you've got enough that you can start selling, and start with that. The people that shoot themselves in the foot are the people that say, well, I won't do anything unless I've got everything perfect. And they spend so much time and money building what they think is perfect. Until you get it out in front of the marketplace and you ask people to part with their cash for it, do you know if it's a good idea? So my one tip is get your smallest possible minimal viable product or service and start that way. Get feedback as soon as you can.
Last question. How many AirPods have you gone through?
3 so far.
3 pairs?
3 pairs. So one, actually I think it's 4. Yeah, it's 4. So one I lost. That's embarrassing. And I lost it somewhere between the office and the house. They're disappeared. One I actually just used into the ground. Killed the batteries, just absolutely killed it. The third one was fine for me. I could hear people perfectly, but people stopped being able to hear me. And so I just got my 4th pair about a month ago. But I can't live without them. If you make me put a phone up to my ear, I feel like a granny. I need my hands free.
Yeah.
So I think 4 so far.
All right, those are the questions. I think we're going to wrap this up. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure for me too.
Okay.